where you got, when you got started playing music, and what was your first instrument you played? If in your case, drums was the first thing you started on, or something else, and shifted to it, or?
Yeah, I started on drums. I grew up I was in high school in the '60s. I was a freshman in '64. I had a lot of older sisters, in the '50s. They all grew up in the '50s when there were still 45 records.
Yeah.
And everything I learned to play was off of their pop songs that they had on a. You could put like 20, 30, 45s on a spindle, and
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen those.
Yeah, I've had them actually. I was a long-time record collector too, so I've played around with those in the past, with putting a bunch of them on the drop spindle thing, and.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was, and that's how I learned how to play it. I turn it on and just put 30, 40 records on and just play every single one. So that's how I started off playing, and I was always a singer, so that was part of it as well.
So it's an interesting thing is singing and playing drums, certainly not a common thing. Did you do that a lot throughout your career?
Yeah, I've done it pretty much my whole life.
Nice. So what were some of your early influences when you were starting out there?
Mostly vocal groups. I was really into the Everly Brothers.
Huh.
That was they were my favorite. And of course the Beatles, and all the British rock.
Yeah.
That was a big deal to me. And then all the Northwest bands, like the Kingsmen and the Wailers and the Dynamics. These were all these, Dave Lewis, a lot of R&B rhythm band and rhythm and blues bands back in those days. Soul bands is what we used to call. James Brown. I was really lucky because when I was growing up, my sister used to take me to concerts that I wasn't supposed to be at. And, what I mean is, I was in clubs at 2 o'clock in the morning after our clubs. And I was 11 years old, believe it or not.
I believe it. I believe it. I was like that as well. I saw my first concert in '77 when I was 7 in Portland as Kiss, down in Portland, Oregon. So my babysitter took me to it. I was in her 20s at the time.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, I used to be in a lot of clubs and stuff in the '80s.
It was really fun for me. I saw a lot of. I was always 3 feet away from the drummer because I was in the club and I could sit that close to him. So it was.
Yeah.
I got to watch a lot of great stuff. And that's how I really learned to play, is by watching and listening.
Yeah. And so you did grow up in the Seattle area or somewhere around there?
Yeah, I did. I was, my family was all from Hawaii, but I was born in Seattle, and we moved to Hawaii, back to Hawaii for a while. But I pretty much went to high school here.
I see. So you had a band pretty early on. It sounds like Blues Feedback, or was there something before that?
Yeah, that was my high school band. But I had bands before that. But in fact, the first band I was ever in was had 2 drummers in it, believe it or not. And that was one of my very first bands. And then the Blues Feedback, which really was that band was amazing because we were all in high school. The piano player in the group, and the organist, his name was Ernie Hatfield Jr. His dad was had played with Ella Fitzgerald back in the day.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so he was a singer and keyboard player. His father was, and so my biggest influence was his dad and my friend Ernie, because back when I was in high school, we'd sit in their living room. They had a Hammond B3 and a upright piano, and then my little set of drums. And Ernie Hatfield Sr. had a notebook. It was just a spiral notebook with all of the songs that he knew that he could think of, organized in decades. So I would just thumb through this book and just pick songs. I had no idea what the song was, or whatever. I had never even heard it. And I would, and of course I didn't know how to play it. He'd go, all you got to do is listen. Just listen to the song and just, play along with that. So I really learned a lot from him. He taught me how to listen and be able to play off the cuff, and He also taught me, he used to say things to me like, space is also music, and I didn't know what he meant at the time, and he'd say things like, it's not how much you play, it's what you don't play as well.
Interesting. Did he have a lot of...
big time influence on me, taught me a lot, and it really served me well, because throughout the years, later on after high school, a lot of the Northwest early rock and roll bands that I was really into, I ended up playing with.
Oh, wow.
Like the Kingsmen, people like that, and Northwest Rock and Roll Band, just the Wailers. I mean, all these kind of different people that I've been listening to. I ended up, being in bands with these guys.
Wow.
And I've also done a lot of. I backed up a lot of people off the cuff as well, like Chuck Berry, John Lee Hooker, a lot of those kind of blues guys as well. Done a lot of those things and having had no rehearsal with them, and having played with Bernie Hatfield Sr., that really gave me the ability to do that.
Wow. So it's sort of a hired hand when somebody came through town, or for an actual tours with Chuck?
I was a hired hand. I was like, I get calls, to coming back to these people, I heard Bruce Springsteen say this one time about Chuck Berry, and the funny part is, Chuck Berry said the exact same thing to me, because when you play with Chuck Berry, he doesn't show up until like 2 minutes before you start playing. And he just walks out on stage, and you don't even know he's going to play. He doesn't even tell you. And so when I met him, I just said, Mr. Berry, what songs are we going to play? And he just looked at me and goes, Chuck Berry songs. And that was it. And that's it. He just goes in and starts the song. You don't even know what song it's going to be, But, I ended up, making it through the set.
Wow. Yeah, I guess you better know his stuff pretty well, huh?
Yeah, the thing about it is Chuck is not afraid to throw you off the stage. He'll stop the band. Right, I've seen him do it. I'm not going to mention names, but I've seen him do it to famous people in Seattle. And just kick him right off the stage, literally. And, he's kind of like Ray Charles that way. Ray Charles is either his way or the highway.
Wow.
So, I mean, you gotta have thick skin.
And it sounds like be able to adapt pretty quickly as well.
Oh, yeah, you better be listening, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, wow.
And listening and watching, that's the big thing for me. Is I'm a big listener, I'm a big watcher, and I'm a good, that's why I'm a great team player. That's what I like about being in bands. Is, I really don't like being in bands where it's all about one person. Unless it's that's it's somebody like Chuck Berry, of course, because that's who it is. But
yeah.
If I'm going to be in a group and share the stage with them, I want it to be a shared experience rather than I have to be into what they're doing.
Yeah. So coming back to Blues Feedback before we got too far off the thing, did you guys? So you guys were together for about 3 or 4 years, sort of thing, or?
Yeah, and I'm sorry to get off the.
Oh no, it was great. That's cool.
Okay, but the Blues Feedback, so that opened up a lot of doors for me in Seattle. When we were in high school, there was a club down on East Lake Avenue called the Longerland Jazz Club. And right around the corner from that was the Helix magazine offices.
Okay.
Helix magazine was just like the Rocket was back in the day.
Yeah.
So the Helix, Paul Dorpat, who still works for the Seattle Times now, does a feature in the pictorial every Sunday about the old Seattle. Probably you might have seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Dorpat was the editor of that particular paper back in the hippie days.
Yeah, I actually had a couple copies of that over the years and read some of them and stuff. And it was sort of the hippie, music mag of the time, as you said before.
It was what everybody looked to hear what's going on, as far as the underground scene was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So Blues Feedback, we go to there's this Longerland Jazz Club. It's a coffee house. And we go there on Friday and Saturday nights because, we could get in and you didn't have to be 18. It was a coffee house and we'd see all these world-class jazz musicians in there. But the problem was there was nobody in there because they didn't draw anybody. And, the guy that ran it, his name was Jerry. He was a bass player, great bass player, by the way. But he's a little nuts. So one day, we finally got up the guts and said to him one day, well, can we play here? And he looks at us and he goes, well, what kind of music do you play? So right, I don't know how it came out of, we just came out of our mouths, jazz rock. You know, he said, okay. So he let us play there, and of course, with all our high school friends, we had nothing else to do. We packed the place. Wow. It was really great for him. It was great for us. You know, we were writing original songs, mostly instrumentals. Jazz rock instrumentals, basically, that were written by our keyboard player, with titles like, you know, D minor expressions, you know, stuff like that. Weird ass shit. But and because of that, Paul Dorpat heard us. And when Paul Dorpat heard us, we started getting hired to play all of these hippie festivals, like the Beans. We played at Eagles Auditorium, which was like the Paramount of its day.
Yeah.
You know, it was like where every band played. I mean, the Cream played there, you know.
Yeah. So
we ended up, you know, every band you can think of, every classic rock band, I mean, from the 60s played there. You know, I saw everybody from the Cream to Joe Cocker, you know, on and on and on. I mean,
yeah.
You know, the Moody Blues played there when they were still a blues band.
Yeah, a Grateful Dead I know played there, and a bunch of other.
Yeah, that was a badass area. I mean, there was some great music back in those days. So we opened a lot of shows for bands there, and we also did a lot of the bands and stuff. And because of that, you know, that turned into our group, the Blues Feedback. Mark and I, you know, after high school, started Mojo Hand. And that was we met a couple of guys from that group, the original members. We met them on the avenue where we all used to hang out, you know, in University Ave. That's kind of where we all met, and then we just put the band together, and it just went from there. We became really popular in the Northwest, one of the most popular bands at the time. And, you know, things just escalated from there. It just kind of, you know, we were always writing music, so that was always part of our scene.
And you guys played a lot of original stuff, it sounds like, at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. But we also love pop music, because, you know, I'm a pop music junkie. I mean, I grew up on pop music. That's what my sisters listened to. I mean, I learned how to play drums to girl bands, you know, like the Shirelles and the Chiffons and things like that. You know, Mary Wells, that's the kind of stuff I listened to and played to. So I have a real, you know, I'm what I call a groove drummer. I don't play all over the place. I'm not some real fancy heavy metal guy that plays a lot of licks. You know, I don't do that kind of stuff. I mainly just lay in the pocket. That's my thing.
I saw on the Pacific Northwest Band's website, and been doing a lot of research through, is that you guys kind of, or at least Mark, I think, is the one that kind of wrote the thing on there, kind of described you guys as a heavy metal, hard rock sort of blues band. Is that point, do you think that's an accurate
of Mojo Hand?
Yeah, description, or?
I wouldn't say heavy metal at all, but I'd say, I would say more blues influenced rock band than anything. And plus jazz. I mean, even though we weren't jazz players, it was just kind of how it worked out. Because, you know, we're highly influenced by, you know, Ernie Hatfield Sr., and his son was in the band. So we had a lot of influence from him, you know, just because of that. And it's because we heard a lot of that music. So even though it didn't even sound like jazz, it was still jazz to us, you know.
Yeah. Interesting.
It wasn't traditional by any means. It was just stuff that we weren't very good. I mean, we're okay, you know. We're just learning how to play.
Yeah. Just out of high school and that time.
Yeah, but we were doing originals from the beginning, so that kind of just escalated, and we never stopped doing it. Even to this day, I still write songs. And so it's just one of those things.
You guys had two guitars with
in the Blues Feedback?
In Mojo Hand.
No, in most bands we had 2 guitars, right?
Bass and drums.
Guitars, bass, and drums.
So did you guys have one singer, or you guys kind of all switched off, or?
Well, it was me. We had 2 singers. We had 3 singers. I was one of the lead singers, and then one of the guitar players, Michael. Michael was mainly the lead singer, and he wrote a lot of the songs. You know, he kind of dominated the group in that way. But I'll be honest with you, the best songs that we wrote were the songs that we all wrote together. And the songs that we wrote together, we wrote on stage, believe it or not. We did a lot of playing. We all lived together, so we practiced all day long. So we'd sleep in till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But right after that, we'd start playing. And we wouldn't stop playing until we had to go to the gig. Wow. And that was every day.
A lot of rehearsal.
Yeah, every day we were playing. And so we're constantly jamming, just being young musicians with a lot of energy. And so that's what we did. And then we ended up playing in a club, these clubs, and a lot of times it was a necessity for us to come up with stuff because we didn't have enough material. So in the beginning, so that's kind of how these songs evolved. In fact, one of our, I won't call it a hit, but it was our fans' favorite song was a song called John the Revelator. We completely made that up on stage, and it was like 25 minutes long.
Now that's a traditional blues song, isn't it?
Yes, you're exactly right, John the Revelator. And what that is this particular version of it is not anything like what you're thinking of.
Wow.
All it is it's those lyrics sung in this song with everything else being totally different.
Oh, wow. So you kind of reworked the whole thing into your own.
The whole thing was our own, all the music was our own, but we would throw in stuff like that. So
I see.
John the Revelator was kind of the anthem in the middle of it, but it was a story. And we just made it up. I mean, it was a lot of talking in the song. And then John the Revelator, we used that blues singer talking about as the chorus.
Yeah. Interesting.
Who's that riding, John the Revelator? You know that thing?
Yeah, I heard the original song. The old blues guy from the 30s or 40s or something did it. I can't remember who offhand, but probably something done by many or over the years or whatever.
Yeah, I can't remember who wrote it. I don't know if it was Robert Johnson, but it was somebody like that.
It's somebody like that, yeah. I don't think it was him, but it was somebody from his time period or something, but yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Leadbelly or somebody.
Yeah, that sounds right, actually. So, so interesting. So, were you guys aware of some of the stuff that was going on with, Led Zeppelin and things like that were reworking a lot of blues classics and things like that, or?
Yeah, well, blues, Led Zeppelin came after us, so I like to say that, they never heard us, of course, but so they were influenced by blues as well. And that's why, how many more years is that's another blues thing that they took from a blues song.
Yeah, Jimmy Page.
There's a lot of stuff that did that was directly taken from blues songs, and they kind of did what we did. So I think that's cool. I mean, you know what you know is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And you're playing with a bunch of guys, and you start writing songs and stuff. You're just, I'm sure Zeppelin did kind of the same thing we did. Somebody comes up with a riff or a beat, and then you just start playing with it, and all of a sudden the singer starts singing something. That's just how it happens. Yeah. It's really kind of a common way that a lot of bands do things.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool that way. You come up with some of your best material that way when everybody contributes to it, and there's a lot of that energy involved in it. Yeah.
Well, and it's a natural evolution, I think, of your influences, and at that time period, a lot of bands, of course, the amplification and effects and pedals and things like that, distortion and so on, were starting to come into play in the late '60s with Hendrix and Cream and those sort of people kind of pioneering stuff, and so I guess the early days of heavy metal and hard rock, which wasn't even really called heavy metal in those days, but a lot of you guys were really pioneering, just kind of pushing the amplification levels and that sort of thing into and reworking, old blues tunes and writing new things and stuff like that. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. Here's an example. Not so much with the blues, but as far as amplification and sounds were concerned. One of the first tours that TGO did was with the Kinks. And having talking with those guys throughout the tour, one of the things they were like, I talked a lot to them, probably more than a lot of the people in the band did, because we knew a lot about Northwest rock and roll history, and I was involved in it. So they were really interested. They were kind of blown away because they were really influenced by groups like the Sonics,
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of that distortion sound that Dave Davies got was because of the Sonics. He talked.
Yeah,
about
Larry Paripe is very pioneering, but just never broke out past the Northwest really, as far as on a bigger scale. Just kind of popular, very popular locally in the mid '60s, but didn't get that international sort of hit. And some of these people kind of were finding out about it. So yeah, not surprised. I know some other British bands had kind of quoted being very influenced by the Sonics and the Wailers and the Frantics and bands like that.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, today, I still know a lot of those guys, and those guys they're touring the world now because of it. They still go to they just go to Spain, for example. Because kids. They're considered like the grandfathers of garage rock.
Oh yeah. It's crazy that stuff actually got played on the radio, like The Witch and things like that back in that time period. So
I love that song.
It's great.
I remember the first time I heard the Sonics. It was at the O'Day High School in the gym, and they were the loudest thing I'd ever heard in my entire life. And they just blew us completely away.
Yeah,
we were so blown away by them. We talked about it for days. Oh my God, did you see the Sonics? Oh my God. Oh, they were so loud, but they were so good. They were in the gym. Back in those days, nobody complained about volume.
Yeah, that's funny. It's just screaming vocals and Rosalie's vocals. Just crazy.
I know, crazy. You know how loose it was in Seattle back in those days? I'll tell you. Here's a really great example. My high school band, the Blues Feedback, we got hired by a congressman named Brock Adams, who was one of the guys around here for a long time. Anyway, his group, he was coming back from Washington D.C., so his committee hired us to meet him at they wanted to have a little meet at when he got off the plane at SeaTac Airport.
Mm-hmm.
So all we got hired to do was play one song, and we were going to play the theme song from Batman, and they were going to say Brockman whenever he said Batman.
Oh wow!
Brockman, that's it, right? So he gets off the plane. We play this one song. We take all our equipment down, and being young guys that we were, we're going like, we need to play some more. So we go downstairs. Right in front of the baggage, claim down at SeaTac, set up our equipment and start playing, and nobody said a fucking word. Nobody said anything. They didn't even care.
That's funny.
That's how it used to be. It was great.
When was this? What year was that? Do you remember? Or?
65 or 66.
Oh, wow.
Something like
So that was pretty early on too in your.
That was very early on. Yeah, I was a fledgling, man. I was like,
wow.
I was like a little baby bird.
Interesting. So.
Yes, thanks.
So with Mojo Hand, you guys you played. It sounded like you played a lot of bars in the early '70s and stuff as things kind of moved away from the dances and it kind of split up.
Yeah, Mojo Hand played bars. That's what we did, and we played bars, festivals, and parties, and that kind of thing. And some concerts. We opened shows for people occasionally. We're kind of whenever there's a big show in town, they need a local band. We usually played it. By the way, that band, we had a reunion 2 years ago in Bend, Oregon, and we're going to do it again in Bend, Oregon this year. We sold out the first that show a couple years ago. 300 people or so took all the money and gave it to the local humane society, and they were able to buy a animal scale so they could weigh their animals.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so it's fun. So we're going to do it again. And, we don't know. It may be the last time we ever get to play together. And we hadn't played together in since high school, so it's been like 30-something years. Like a couple of years ago when we finally did our first get together.
But that's for Blues Feedback that you're doing the reunion for?
Yeah, Blues Feedback.
Oh, wow. So all original members, or?
Yeah, all original members.
Wow.
We weren't doing any original music. We were just doing stuff we wanted to play, stuff that was easy. We didn't have to, because we didn't have any rehearsal time. We just got together and started playing.
Wow. Well, let me know if you guys do any more shows in Oregon or Washington. I'd love to come see.
Well, yeah, we're Oregon. You can come to Bend, Oregon. You're welcome to come to it.
I actually was thinking about maybe making a trip down there this year. I had a couple business things to connect up with a couple people down there and promoting a non-related event we're doing in Portland as well in November. So, yeah, might have to time that around you guys playing. I'd love to come see you guys jam.
Yeah, so I think it's July. It's in the middle of July.
Okay.
I'll send you an invitation.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's going to be, don't expect a great, some great band, but it is just a fun band. We're just going to play stuff that, whatever feels right. But it'll be fun. You'll have a good time.
Yeah, especially for you guys.
Outdoors, we have it at the Lost Tracks Golf. It's a public golf course. We put it on there. That's
nice.
And we play outside on their deck. And it's last time we did it was a beautiful night. It was just magical.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of
bands. Some good friends of ours have a band down there, and they're kind enough to allow us to use their PA and stuff and some of their equipment, and they'll open the show, and then we do a set, and then they do another, and then we do another, and it's kind of one of those things.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like fun.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah. It's not a big deal, but it's a lot of fun for us. I hope if you come, I hope you enjoy yourself.
Sounds like the last one did pretty well. So
it did real well. I mean, like I said, you couldn't have got, the place was crowded.
Nice. So getting back to Mojo Hand, you guys played until about '73. It sounds like you did a shift down to California for a little while to try to get.
Yeah, we tried to make it per se, as they say. What we did was we packed up all our gear. We just said, "Fuck it, we're going to go down to California, make it or break it." And we went down to Hollywood, rented a van, moved down to Hollywood, lived out in a motel out in Malibu until the money ran out, and just tried to work. And we went to we would stop in at different recording studios and try to talk to people and do gigs as much as we could, and really got a pretty good awakening of what the music business was like in LA. And it was not pretty. It was that was the first time we'd ever seen 4 bands playing in a bar, and you were only one of 4 and with no money.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, and just the whole Hollywood scene. It was pretty discouraging. So we moved up to the Bay Area after that. Lived in a frat house, and we became their house band.
Interesting.
Yeah. The way that worked out was we knew one of the girls we knew from Seattle was in a sorority down there, and she introduced us to some of these frat boys. And they heard our band, they went, "Oh, you guys are great. Why don't you, if we give you a place to live, and we'll feed you as well, because we have meals prepared for us every day by our own house cook, this big, frat house like they have at the, you know what I'm talking about."
Yeah.
Then whenever we need a band, will you guys play? We go, "Of course." So we did. That's how we lived, and that's where we lived at. We lived in a frat house. And we would have, I don't know what would have came out of that, but what eventually ended up happening is our guitar player, Michael, was a draft dodger. So from the Vietnam, that was Vietnam era, remember that. And so the FBI caught up with him, and took him back to Seattle, and he ended up spending a year in an honor camp out on the on the coast out in Washington.
Jeez, and that was
and
probably
that sucked. So that kind of broke up the band for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, only a year or two before, 75 is when they ended the Vietnam War finally, Nixon, or not Nixon, I mean.
Yeah, he was not lucky that way. You know, I was really lucky because we were all draftable, but they had the lottery system, right? I got a really high lottery number. I think there was 300 numbers, and I got 341.
I see.
Yeah, so I don't even think they got past 100 and something numbers.
I see. Yeah, it's got lucky.
Anyway.
Yeah, so that kind of broke you guys up, and it sounds like you moved back to Seattle for a while, or?
Yeah, I moved back to Seattle. Just played around. I played with a lot of different groups around here and did whatever I could do because I was a dedicated musician at the time. Now I'm still playing, but I'm pretty much retired.
So then, so eventually, it sounds like you got Mojo Hand back together and started getting some different members. I know Rick Pierce said he joined in somewhere. 75
Michael,
or something.
We got together back with Michael, and that, something really happened to him. I don't know what happened to him, but it was never the same after he went to jail.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he was really affected by that, and so we didn't have the same chemistry going on. So we tried a number of configurations, and Rick was one of them. Rick joined the band, and because of that, we ended up starting TKO. It was Rick and I and Mark Seidenberg were the original members of. We actually started the TKO band first.
Yeah.
And then we were looking for a singer, and we ended up with Brad, and eventually Tony became part of the band as well.
And that became the lineup that you guys started.
That became the lineup that recorded the first Let It Roll album. Yeah.
Rick had said that you also hooked up with Ken Kinnear at that point when you reformed it as a manager and kind of booking stuff for you and that sort of thing around.
Right. I've been working with Ken Kinnear for years before that. He was very interested in Mojo Hand. And so before Rick was even on the scene with us.
I see. So he was booking.
Ken had already been working with Mojo Hand. He wanted to do something with us. But then Michael just kind of lost it. So that's when we decided we have to do something else. And that's when we ended up with different members in the band. And so that's why we had the Kinnear connection. Ken Kinnear originally started off as he was a used car salesman. Yeah, he still has this company. It's called West Coast Auto Wholesale.
Oh, wow. I didn't know he still...
Well, he still has it. I don't know if he does much with it, but, last time I talked to him was about a year ago.
Well, I know he
still had it going on. He still has that business.
So you guys played... He had the thing going with... I know he had a bar initially that he started trying to book bands and then moved on to...
Yeah, that was Judge Roy Beans out in Roy, Washington.
And then he was doing... So you guys played the Moore Theater and some of the places that he had...
Right.
Kind of in his...
I'll give you kind of a short synopsis of Kinnear and how he got into this whole thing. You're right. He started the bar, and he wanted to do more. He had partners. He wanted to book bands and do concerts, but his partners didn't want to do it because they didn't want to risk the money.
Yeah.
So Ken risked the money, and he took a big chance in a group that became huge, Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Yeah.
And that started it for him. And he started at the Moore Theater. That's where he put on his first concerts, and then that just escalated into, becoming Albatross Productions, and, eventually he hooked up him and Bauer became partners, even though they hated each other and they were arch rivals.
That's what Rick said. They hated each other. He thought it was the funniest thing. They ended up being big partners later.
Yeah, it's funny how money will bring people together and push them.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all a matter of greed.
Joyce is already outside.
Strange bedfellows.
Yeah, that's funny because that's exactly what Rick said a couple days ago, was that money makes strange bedfellows.
Yeah, really? Okay, that's good. Yeah, great minds think alike.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Here's a funny story about Bauer. when TKO finally got a record deal, and we're in New York, we were playing. I think we were playing at the Palladium in New York, and it was great always being in New York because that's where our record company was. So we always got first class treatment when we were there. Anyway, so I come to the show, and backstage is John and Ivy Bauer, his wife, and we're in New York, and Kinnear's in Seattle, and John and Ivy Bauer are, they're courting Brad. And so I get on the phone and I call Kinnear and I say, guess who's backstage? And he goes, who? And I go, John and Ivy Bauer. Kinnear was there on the next flight.
Trying to steal his client.
New York on the next flight. I am not kidding you. That's weird shit.
That's funny.
That's what the kind of rivalry they had. They didn't trust each other, and I don't blame them because I wouldn't trust either one of them when it came to what they were doing. They still, I don't know if Bauer. I'm not trying to say bad things about them, but that's just that business.
Yeah, agents and managers in any business, whether it's publishing or music or whatever sort of thing, always seem to, the ones that are really make a huge name or end up being very successful are oftentimes very aggressive and sell their grandma for $1 or some sort of thing.
Oh yeah, they take no prisoners, man. They'll just do whatever they have to do to make it.
So you guys toured quite a bit at that time. You had the record come out, which I know the story, unfortunately, of it just as the TKO was going through coming out with second record, the label folded, sort of thing. But that was after you left the band or were gone from the band, or? Yeah,
Mark and I, after we got done with we toured a couple times with the TKO band, and then we were kind of just, at that point in our lives, we were just kind of like, this whole, the whole rock band thing on the road was kind of like really wearing on us. And, so we got back to Seattle, played the Paramount, and quit the band, basically, and they were on their way to Japan after that. So that was pretty much it. That was pretty much it with TKO for us.
I see. So you just
went our separate ways, and, that's the way. And then they did, whatever they did after we left.
Yeah, you kind of it sounds like Brad put together another band and went on the road sort of thing, and to Japan and all that.
That's exactly right. They were moving in different directions, and so were we.
It's an interesting band.
It was all fine.
Yeah, I was never quite sure of the story because there's so many mixed sort of things, and Brad Sinsel being bad Brad Sinsel, of course, likes to tell an interesting story. It sounds like. Let's just say that there's a lot of embellishment going. Well, there's always the truth somewhere in the middle.
Here's what I don't like to do. I don't want to get in some war words with somebody over any of that stuff, because I'll be honest with you, it really doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Because, the people are they're going to hear what they hear, and this stuff is old history anyway. And it's, hopefully, you'll write something good about us and, and say some positive things. I could really care less about all the negative stuff. That happens in every band. And, I'm way past that, all of that. Those years have gone by, and I'm done with all of that. So I just rather, keep it light and keep it positive. Yeah, I hear you. And I'm not that type of writer. In fact, I actually cut some stuff out of a couple people's interviews that were pretty inflammatory towards other band members. Or just exactly. Because why? Here's the thing. It's like getting a divorce. Mm-hmm. There's her story, my story, and exactly. The real truth. I want this book to be something everybody's happy to be in and be part of and happy that it's out there. And so if I feel something is like somebody says something that's pretty negative towards somebody else, I'll either try to ask them to tone it down, or I might just cut it in general if it's not that important to. Well, you'll never get a job with the National Enquirer. No, I don't want a job. Thank God. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, all the people By the way, I don't know if you know this. I mean, it may not mean anything to you, but there's I was at the Mohai Museum of history and industry in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a Northwest rock and roll section in there now, and TKO is part of it.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what they moved from the EMP museum that was there for a few years that you guys had.
I don't know if it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I really don't know, because I've only, I got a personal tour of EMP back in the day from one of the guys that ran the place at one time, because TKO was put in there.
Yeah.
And he gave me a personal tour of it, and I saw a little bit of it, so I don't really know if it's the same thing because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta just remember, this whole TKO thing. Hell, dude, that's like 30-something years ago.
I know.
That's a long fucking time. A lot of people weren't even born yet, so.
It's interesting because there was 3 albums with 3 different bands, other than Brad was the only consistent.
Yeah, Brad.
And yet they're all really good albums. I mean, it's a testament to, it kind of stuck with the vision of the band and that sort of thing. And all the ups and downs, the fact they even got out there with so many problems, at least with a couple of the albums, as far as, 3 or 4 years for the second album to finally get, released. And,
yeah.
But,
I mean, I gotta hand it to him. He stuck with it, and he did what he did.
well, there's still, I know,
Good for him.
I went and saw Adam Brenner with Scott Earl from Culprit and a few other bands, and
yeah, Adam Brenner, that's another story too. I only know, how I know Adam? Because I knew his sister.
Yeah.
Sister, we called her Sister Thumper. That was her name, her nickname. And she got married to a good friend of mine back in the day, and I went to their wedding and everything. And I used to see Adam every once in a while. I'd go out to their house and I'd see Adam out there, but he was a little boy back then. Never thought he'd become a guitar player, but his parent, that Brenner family, the famous Jewish bakery, man.
Yeah, well, I guess he was kind of the spoiled rich kid sort of thing, where he got, he's telling me I got a chance to interview him for a short bit after or before he went on, and they tell me like when he was 15, 16 years old, his dad bought him a used Alfa Romeo, and they bought him a bunch of guitars and equipment and things. So he always had. But yeah, it's just interesting because he was in TKO when he was like 16 years old.
Yeah.
17 years old.
I don't know the story, but I heard him and Brad didn't get along.
It's interesting because like they seem to, most of the songwriting is pretty much Brad's vocals and Adam's music, and on that second album, and he still plays some of the songs. They actually had Gary Thompson showed up and played a couple TKO songs with him and Scott Earl at this recent show a couple weeks back up in Georgetown up there, and it was interesting because they and then a lot of his style seemed to kind of come from that sort of school of like the glam rock sort of sleaze,
right.
Aerosmith, Stones kind of vibe.
That was that kind of thing going on, and he grew up in that Lake Hills area in Bellevue, and all those kind of groups were kind of doing that glam rock thing back then. It seemed like. Yeah. And of course, that's where Brad comes from, really. One of the bands he was in the Seattle area, which I really loved this band at the time. They were called the Whiz Kids.
Yeah, Rick was in that too.
Yeah, Rick was in that too. They used to do some pretty wild things.
Yeah, it's such a unique band, and so like nothing else really around that time going on in Seattle or Oregon.
Nothing at all. I mean, they were like weird when it came down to it, but they're weird in a cool way.
Yeah. And so.
Yeah,
So you
had coffins on stage, things like that.
Crazy.
Weird ass stuff.
Performance art incorporation, definitely.
Performance art. That's what it was.
Yeah,
That's where it was. First performance art band I'd ever seen.
Interesting. So you guys, they played in a couple, like a festival or two with Mojo Hand was in, didn't they, or something, or?
They did. I don't know about it.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. Through the years, a lot of the guys that I knew when I was touring a lot and playing a lot, the reason I got to know them is because we were playing the same shows.
Yeah.
And so, but you could have asked me who the bands were in the town at the time, and I probably wouldn't have known because I never saw anybody.
Yeah.
I was gone a lot, and so I didn't really didn't really experience, seeing a lot of those groups. But the ones I saw when I had time off, I had a good time doing that, of course. But I'd go to see, bands that people were talking about, and had a great time. There were some really good bands back then. WizKids were one of them.
Interesting. Yeah. It's so you guys quit. So you and Mark quit TKO, and did you take some time off after that, or did you go on to do something else?
Well, I took some time off. Yeah, I was burnt out. I needed time off. I took about a year off.
I see.
And then I just started playing in local bands. In fact, I played in a country band for a while.
Yeah, interesting.
The funny part, I played a lot of country in my time as well. I play everything. I subscribe to the Duke Ellington, theory. It's, there's only two kinds of music, good and bad. So that's what I subscribe to. And if it's a good band, I'll play with them. And if they like me and we get along, I'll play with them. So that's kind of where it's at for me. I like all good music. That particular band I got into at the time, I don't even remember their name now. And the reason I got hired is because I put an ad in the paper selling a bunch of equipment, and I said, I quit. I'm selling everything. And so this guy calls me up and says, well, if you want to play with me in a band? I go, dude, I just said I quit. He talked me into it, so I ended up playing.
Funny. So, it sounds like you, as you mentioned earlier on, that you went and played with some of the bands that you were a fan of in the 60s that were like the Wailers and reunion sort of things, or? Well,
okay, mainly, just not reunions. I actually played with a bunch of members of the Kingsmen, like Barry Curtis, for example, who's now playing with the Daily Flash up here in Seattle.
Oh, that's another 60s band.
They were another 60s band, local band that I loved. I loved the Daily Flash. They're still together with, a couple of, they're not all, it's only one original member, but it's still a good band.
I see, yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so stuff like that, we actually did bands together. As far as the other groups are concerned, I've just played a lot of gigs with those guys in different band formations, like, sub for drummers.
I see.
That were in a band, couldn't be there at the time, and I just go in and play with them.
Nice.
So, that kind of thing.
Studio stuff as well, or?
No, not a lot of studio stuff. I was never really a great studio drummer. I hated being in the studio, to be honest with you.
I see.
It was just, I don't know, there's something about the studio that takes all the balls out of everything.
Huh.
For me. I grew up in the day back in those days. That's when they muffled everything so much on drums. I mean,
yeah.
They put so much muffling on your drums, they sound like pieces of shit.
Now they mic everything. And
yeah, everything was close mic, and you couldn't have one, this rattle or that rattle, a little ring, they hate it. So everything got, pillow stuffed in it, tape all over it. You just sound like shit. So I always hated being in the studio. That's my honest to God truth. I hated it.
I don't think that's too uncommon because so many bands have tried to capture that live sound, and going when they went into the studio to record an album or something like that is always the challenge to make it sound like something. And so many bands don't sound like they do live when you hear the album as well, sort of thing. So not surprising.
Yeah, because for one, it's a discipline to be in the studio. You have to be really disciplined to be in there. And I've never been a disciplined player. I'm a field player, so I'm not the kind of guy you should hire for a recording session because I'll probably get pissed and leave. Because it's too much work and it's too much repetitiveness.
That's interesting.
And it's just kind of the stuff that would bug me. There's a lot of players that I respect that are, great musicians all around, but I could never be like them.
So you guys didn't record any of the Mojo Hand stuff when you guys were
not really. No. It wasn't available back in those days. If you wanted to record, you actually had to hire some really expensive studio to do it. And, we were high school kids, and just out of high school and in our early 20s. We didn't have any money to do that. We were barely surviving.
Yeah, I understand. So Rick Pierce had mentioned that you guys did do some, when you guys were doing some demos for after TKO came together that you guys did have some Mojo Hand songs that you were kind of demoing or whatever at that point as part of them, and then some newer stuff you guys wrote that, of course, ended up on the first TKO album. Was that the case? Is there some demos floating around that you guys?
You know, if there are, I don't know where they are because well, if we recorded some, it was probably on some shitty ass recorder that we were submitting to Kinnear all the time, and just listen to them. And, you know, we're kind of just keep this in mind when you're a young musician and you're just trying to make it, just trying to get somebody to listen to you. You're going to do anything you possibly can to get them to listen. So if this guy who has success in the area says, I need to hear some songs that I think I can sell, you're going to just keep writing songs and submitting them to him until he says, okay, I like that one.
Yeah.
So whatever happened to those tapes, I don't know.
Well, I wonder if they exist. I wasn't quite sure if he...
I bet you they do, and I bet you Kinnear has them because he doesn't throw anything.
I think Rick said that he thought Ken might still have them or something like that. So
he probably does, but you know, getting them out of them is like pulling teeth.
You know, there was a release of the first. So they did the first two TKO albums. Label put out on CD issues back in 2008 or 2009 or something like that and there was on the first album, supposedly they're at least legitimate from Brad, you know, connecting up with him or whatever, but there was a show that was on the radio like in 78 or something that you guys played, or it was a concert they broadcast on one of the stations up there. Do you remember that? Or
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. We actually did I think it was for KZOK.
Okay.
And I think we did that. We recorded that show live at K. Smith Studios.
It sounds like a few other bands did that too.
Recording studio back in the day.
Yeah. It became Steve Lawson's studio. And
right, exactly.
Eventually, Bad Animals when Nancy
Bad Animals, right?
Yeah.
That was one of those. You know, yeah, that was the professional studio at that particular time.
It sounds like it was pretty expensive to go in there unless you got, saved up your money or got, won it from a contest or something like that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was really expensive. I think back in those days, and keep in mind, this is, those days, so this is really expensive. I think if I recall, it was like a couple $100 an hour.
Yeah.
That's like a couple thousand today.
Yeah.
I mean, to a musician with no money, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. You'd pretty much have to have somebody.
The only reason we were able to do that is because, because of the Kinnear connection, and KZOK wanted something to play.
I see.
And so they wanted a radio spot because they were actively promoting. At that time, I think they were actively promoting, local bands, playing live at recording studios or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was.
I see.
But that's kind of how that happened. That wasn't a bad tape, if I recall.
Yeah, I heard it. It's pretty good. You guys are a bit heavier and louder live, of course, than on the albums.
Oh yeah. We were produced by Mike Flicker, so and everything was dead. So
yeah, it's like he kind of polished it up.
That's how they recorded it in the 70s.
Yeah.
They muffled everything.
Stryker was like that too. I interviewed Scott Rosberg. We talked about that a little bit, and he said that and from what I've heard of a couple things here and there, they definitely sounded a bit heavier and so forth live.
They were much better live than their album ever made them sound like.
Even though it's
right about that. Stryker was a good band.
Yeah.
Scott Rosberg was a great musician and a great singer.
Yeah, he's still playing around a lot too with various friends.
In fact, a friend of mine plays bass with Richard Evans, a bass player.
Yeah, Evan Sheely's playing with him too.
A couple of weeks ago with him there. Just a small club.
Yeah, I guess he just plays all over the place, and I got to go check him out. He does some pretty cool sort of power trio, late 60s, early 70s.
He's a real great singer, man. He's a great rock singer.
I always thought he had a really good voice.
Yeah, he's got a really cool voice. I mean, he could sing all that Zeppelin and Rod Stewart and, all that kind of cool stuff. That he had the voice for it, so he's a good singer, no doubt.
So yeah, well, trying to think of anything else I wanted to ask. I guess if no, so I don't know if you're still in the band now. There's a band D Cruiser that you were doing.
Well, that's a long time gone. No,
okay.
I'm still in that band. That was an original band that I put together. Harry Curtis from the Kingsmen was in that band.
Okay, so that was the one you're talking about.
Yeah. I had my nephew Tony Sokolik playing drums.
Huh.
I was the lead singer and songwriter and rhythm guitar player. And then there was who do we have on bass? Oh, this friend of mine, Bernie Lacombe, was on bass, and then who sings? He's one of those bass players, kind of like in the Timothy Schmidt vein, who sings really high. So.
Okay. Yeah.
And then this other friend of mine, Rusty Williams, was on guitar.
So it's a 5-piece band.
Yeah. And we did all my originals. That's all we did.
Oh.
That didn't last very long. That was a couple of years.
I'm surprised you didn't get, even with your, all the years you played in different bands and stuff, and even the Kingsman connection. You'd think that, do you guys have trouble getting gigs, or?
I've never really had trouble getting gigs, except of course, in the last. And this is not just me, but in the last 10 years in the Northwest, the music scene is really, it's not like it used to be.
Yeah.
And, there's not any gigs worth, packing your... I tell people now, you don't pay me to play, you pay me to move my equipment. And so it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
They're not even paying you enough to even move. In fact, $75 is... I made that when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I just won't go out the door for that. So
that's what I've heard. Sure.
But I want to make at least, I want to make at least $250 when I go out the door.
Yeah, that's understandable.
I really do. I mean, I don't, I think I deserve that. I think it's for me. So that's why I only play now. I'm playing parties and weddings and things like that where they have people actually pay you money.
Yeah, it's pretty
just that commentary, because the guys that are growing up today don't get to play the kind of as much as we used to. We used to play 7 days a week, 7 nights a week, because there was work to do that. There were bars to play in, and we played 4 hours a night minimum. So at a bar, so we got a lot of playing time in, and there's no substitute for that.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the guys now. They play 30 minutes or 45 and they're done. It's like you cannot. Your craft does not build that way. You got to be playing. You got to be playing somewhere else. Another 10 hours a day or something. But live tests it all. I mean, it shows you what you're made out of. So if you're not playing live all the time, as a young guy, you're not gonna really progress that much, in my view.
It's probably why a lot of bands last a year, couple years sort of thing and break up, or people move on to other things, is just so competitive. There's quite a scene for just in the heavy metal hard rock sort of scene in Oregon and Washington. It's just this really strong scene, but I don't think any of them really make a whole lot of money. I've heard a lot of bands playing for a couple $100 or this sort of thing, or just exposure.
Quote unquote exposure and bands playing for actually paying to play to open shows. That is so stupid to me. And that literally started. Remember I told you when I moved to LA? Yeah. That's kind of where that started, and that was a long time ago. And that was, like I said, that was a big awakening for me. Fortunately, I didn't have to deal with that. Very long, but I don't know how people would do it today. I know they're not making any money. I know clubs aren't paying people much money at all if they pay them, even if they do pay them.
There's a lot of it's like a ticket. If there's some that'll let the bands come play and basically for free, and then you sell as many tickets as you can sell, kind of thing. And the clubs just sell a bunch of drinks and whatever to cover. Or you pay a couple $100 on up to, like some of the crazy LA, pay $1,000 to book the club for your band. And and then see how many tickets you can sell to try to cover it, or what. No risk on the club's part.
That's stupid, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're cheating yourself if you think you're going to play one show and everybody's going to drop to the floor and think you're gods, because it's not going to happen.
No, it takes a while to build it up. It
takes a long while. You got to build it. You have to either go out on the road or play constantly, or just do a circuit and play that constantly until you gain fans. Because the people your close contacts are only so many, and they're not going to come to every gig. You really have to have a band that's actually going to, actually touch people and musically to make them keep coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, especially without an album or something like that to promote.
All that hype that goes along with that.
Well, I think that's about it for me. I've just maybe in looking back, what do you think your impact's been on the Northwest music scene and maybe the music scene in general?
Oh God, are you kidding me?
You don't have to answer if you don't want.
Absolutely not. We're all just pawns in the game. It's like. I'm just a journeyman, man. I just play, I play what I play, and if somebody likes it, I like. That's great. But I've got no illusions about all of that. Yeah, I had my time in the sun for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I got to a point where most musicians never get, and most musicians will never even come close to a record deal, especially today.
Yeah.
But and I played with some really great people in my lifetime, and I played with some of my idols, and some of. I've got to tour with some of those guys. I've actually gotten to play with some of them as well.
Yeah.
I've got to play with my local idols. For me, and the enjoyment I've gotten out of playing music, that's all that really matters to me.
Mm.
The rest of that shit I could care less about. Because, I'm no Jimi Hendrix, and I know that. Are you kidding me?
Well, I think that's a good
Jimi Hendrix, now, that was the man. Yeah, there's the guy.
Well, he was like
people.
He was like a comet that burned out pretty quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah, he was great, though. But
yeah. Well, I appreciate so much you taking your time, Daryl. It's the 70s is a tough area to fill in, and with the scope of this book, of course, heavy metal, hard rock music really started around the late 60s, early 70s, and so that's when I'm starting the book, and a lot of bands there's not information for out there. There's very minimal amount, and just trying to fill in the blanks for everything has been pretty much of a challenge. And so anytime I've got a chance to interview somebody that was there, and it really helps a lot. So I very much appreciate you taking the time, and I'll definitely keep you in the loop. Of course, you'll get a copy of the book when it's done. I'm shooting for it to be done sometime in 2016. I'll keep you in the loop, definitely.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate you even thinking about me, and I wish you the best
Thank you.
in your venture. And